I never thought I'd be the guy writing something like this, but here we are. My name's Mike, and about 6 months ago I was diagnosed with cancer. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Suddenly, my life was a whirlwind of doctors, chemo sessions, and trying to hold everything together. My wife Emily was supposed to be my rock, my partner in all this mess. We'd been married for 5 years. She was supposed to be my best friend, the one person I could count on. But honestly, looking back, I should have seen the signs. She started acting weird, distant, distracted, overly busy. At first, I thought maybe she was just stressed or overwhelmed, but then she started lying about small things, canceling plans, saying she was working late when I knew she was. And the worst part, I brushed it off because I was so caught up with fighting cancer. I didn't want to believe she was capable of anything else. But some things don't stay hidden forever. About 2 weeks ago, I noticed her phone kept buzzing at odd hours, late at night when she thought I was asleep. She would quickly grab it, hide the screen when I looked her way like she was trying to hide something. That's when I got suspicious. I started paying closer attention. One night I saw her leave her phone on the kitchen counter when she went to the bathroom. I figured, what the hell, I'll check. I wasn't expecting much, just a typical text, maybe some work email, but what I found made my stomach drop. There were messages between her and her best friend Jake that weren't just friendly. They were flirty, intimate even. The way they talked about meeting up, about keeping it secret. The way they both called each other babe and baby, it was sickening. And the worst part, they planned to meet that very weekend to go to that bed and breakfast they joked about for months without me knowing. I couldn't breathe. My mind spun in 1,000 directions. How could she do this to me, especially now when I was fighting for my life? I felt furious, betrayed, gutted. I remember just sitting there, staring at the screen, unable to move. My chest felt tight, the kind of pain that doesn't just come from anger but from heartbreak. How many nights had she lied to me? How long had this been going on? And what about the wedding plans she'd been hinting at? She'd been talking about renewing vows, about us having a big party. All a lie. All a game she played behind my back. I knew I had to confront her. I didn't want to, not then. I was exhausted physically and emotionally, but I couldn't keep quiet. That night I waited until she got home from her work event, which I now knew was a lie, and I called her out. I blocked the door, looked her straight in the eyes, and just said, "Who the hell is Jake?" She blinked, the sudden seriousness catching her off guard. She tried to brush it off, laugh it away, say I was paranoid, that I was imagining things. But I showed her the messages. Her face twisted. She went from smug to genuinely angry in seconds. Her excuse? That it was just sex, that Jake was just a friend with benefits and she was bored with me. She said I was paranoid, that I was overreacting because I was sick and vulnerable. That hurt worse than the betrayal itself. I was shattered. I'd always thought I was the kind of guy who could handle anything, cancer, heartbreak, betrayal, but this tore me apart. I felt like I was falling into a deep, dark hole and there was no way out. I wanted to scream, cry, break something, but I just stood there, stunned, trying to process what I just found out. I knew then that my marriage was over, at least the version of it I thought I had. I couldn't believe she'd do this, especially now when I needed her most. And I knew I had to decide what to do next. I was furious, but I was also hurt, deeply. I'd always believed in loyalty and honesty, and here she was, laughing and lying, planning a wedding behind my back. I thought I knew her, but I realized I'd been blind. That night I couldn't sleep. All I could see was her face, that smug look when she lied to me, the messages on her phone, the plans for her secret wedding with Jake. How long had this been going on? Was she ever really mine? Or was I just a pit stop while she looked for her next thrill? I felt so stupid for trusting her, for thinking I could fight through cancer and keep my marriage intact. Turns out I was just a fool. The next morning I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. Everything was spinning, my mind, my body, my heart. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. The betrayal ran so deep, I wondered how I'd ever look at her the same way again. I kept replaying that night's confrontation in my head, trying to understand how she could lie so effortlessly, how she could plan her wedding behind my back while I was lying in bed, fighting for my life. It was a sick joke, and I felt like I'd been punched in the gut over and over. I knew I had to do something, but what? Part of me wanted to storm into her office, demand the truth, tear her apart with my words. But I also knew that wouldn't solve anything. It would only make things messier. I needed a plan, a way to get her to admit everything without tipping her off entirely. I started to think about how best to approach this, how to catch her in the act again, maybe even expose everything to her face. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I needed leverage. Somehow, I had to make her see that I wasn't just some naive husband to be played with. So I started collecting evidence. I went through her phone, her emails, her social media accounts, whatever I could find that might give me more clues. I found more messages between her and Jake, some from earlier this year, hints of secrecy, plans for the wedding, and even flirtatious jabs that made my blood boil. I also noticed she'd been deleting things, trying to cover her tracks, but I knew how to dig deeper. I'd been in IT long enough to recover deleted messages and see hidden files. I spent days going through her stuff, learning her routines, her habits, her contacts. All the while, the anger simmered beneath my skin, ready to boil over. Meanwhile, Emily kept acting like everything was normal, well, as normal as it could be with her sneaking around behind my back. She was bitchy, dismissive, snapping at me over little things, trying to brush off my questions. The more I pressed her, the more she lied. "You're crazy," she said. "You're just paranoid because you're sick. Maybe I need a break." That cut deep, her dismissiveness, her dismissive tone, like I was just some burden she'd rather forget. I wanted to scream at her, tell her how much this hurts, but I held my tongue. Instead, I decided I'd wait, bide my time, and gather enough proof to make her regret everything. One afternoon, I caught her in a lie about where she'd been. She said she was at a friend's house, but I tracked her phone GPS and found her at a hotel not far from us. My stomach clenched. I knew then she was planning to meet Jake again, probably for the wedding, maybe even to pack her bags for good. That's when I knew I couldn't just sit on this anymore. I had to confront her again, but this time I wanted everything out in the open. No more pretending, no more hiding. I needed her to face the consequences of what she'd done. I prepared myself for the showdown. I made sure I had all the evidence I needed, screenshots, GPS logs, deleted messages recovered. I wanted her to see that. I wasn't some naive fool that I knew everything. I wanted to see her squirm, to see her try to lie her way out of it again. I wanted her to feel the pain she'd caused me, and I was ready to give it to her. I knew this would shatter whatever facade she was hiding behind, but I didn't care anymore. I was done being the nice guy. All that was left was justice, or at least some form of it. When she finally came home that evening, I was waiting. I didn't say a word at first. I just looked at her, my eyes cold and hard. She sensed something was wrong, but she tried to act casual to brush it off. I pulled out my phone, showed her the GPS logs, the messages, the hotel receipt I'd found in her purse. Her face crumpled, her eyes darted around, trying to come up with an excuse. But I had enough now. I told her everything I knew, every lie, every plan. Her bitchy attitude vanished, replaced with panic and anger. She started yelling, calling me paranoid, crazy, accusing me of spying because I was jealous or insecure. But I wasn't about to let her gaslight me anymore. I was done playing her game. That moment I realized I'd reached the breaking point. I told her I was done, that I couldn't trust her anymore, that she was a liar and a cheat. I told her she wasn't the person I thought she was, and that I'd be leaving her soon. She snapped at me, called me all sorts of names, said I was just some sick guy trying to ruin her life. Honestly, I didn't care what she said. I felt a strange mixture of relief and despair. Relief because I finally knew the truth, and despair because the woman I loved had become a stranger, a betrayer. That day was a turning point. I realized the marriage was over, at least the one I thought I had. I was exhausted, physically and emotionally drained, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not without consequences. Not without her feeling the full weight of what she'd done. The pain was still there and probably always would be, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I was angry. Yes, but I also knew I had to decide how to move forward, and I knew this was only the beginning. After that confrontation, everything changed. I felt like I was walking around in a fog, but at the same time, I finally saw clearly for the first time. Emily kept acting like nothing had happened, trying to brush off the evidence, sitting there with that bitchy smirk she always wore when she thought she was in control. But I wasn't fooled anymore. I knew she'd been lying for months, probably even longer. The woman I thought I knew had turned into someone I barely recognized, someone capable of planning her wedding with Jake behind my back while I was fighting for my life. That realization hit me like a punch in the gut every morning I woke up. I didn't tell her I was planning revenge right away. Honestly, I didn't even know what I was going to do at first. For a couple of days, I just sat there, trying to process everything, trying to figure out how to get even. I knew I had to hit back somehow, but I wanted to do it smart, not impulsively. I started thinking about how I could make her feel the same pain she'd caused me. I wanted her to see that I wasn't just some pushover, that I could fight back, even if I was sick and weak. The hardest part was deciding what kind of revenge was worth it, what would hurt her the most, something that make her regret her whole betrayal. So I started laying the groundwork. I kept digging through her stuff, looking for vulnerabilities, ways to turn her own lies against her. I knew she was planning to leave, to run away with Jake, maybe even to get married quickly, get her new life started without me. If I could expose that, make her realize I knew everything, I thought maybe I could stop her, or at least hurt her enough to make her think twice. I even hacked into her email account. She'd been careless leaving her phone unlocked, and found drafts of messages she'd written to Jake about the wedding details, the secret plans, how she'd finally gotten rid of him. That was a shock, but also a gift. Now I had undeniable proof. Meanwhile, Emily kept up her bitchy attitude, snapping, dismissing, acting superior. She'd even tried to gaslight me, calling me paranoid and crazy, saying I was just bitter because I was sick. That made me furious. I knew her game now. She was trying to make me feel guilty, trying to make me doubt myself, but I refused to let her. I started planning my next move. I wanted her to know I wasn't naive anymore, that I was one step ahead. I decided I'd set a trap, something that would force her to admit everything, or at least reveal her true colors. One day, I made a fake social media profile, pretending to be another woman interested in Jake. I started messaging her, playing along, slowly inching closer to her, pretending I didn't know about her plans. I wanted her to slip up, to give herself away. I also set up a hidden camera in the living room. I knew she'd come home eventually, and I wanted to catch her in the act of lying or sneaking around. It was risky, I know, but I was desperate and angry enough to go to any length. I kept her under surveillance, waiting for the moment to strike. When she finally came home that evening, I was ready. I called her into the living room, showed her the messages from the fake account, things I knew she'd said to Jake, her plans for the wedding, her hope to start fresh without me. Her face drained of color. She started yelling, claiming I hacked her accounts, that I was crazy, that I was just trying to ruin her. I could see the panic in her eyes. That's when I revealed the hidden camera footage. It caught her trying to pack a bag, whispering on the phone to Jake about where they'd meet at the hotel. Her bitchy attitude gave way to outright panic. She screamed, calling me a jealous psycho, saying I was trying to ruin her life because I was insecure. But I didn't care. I'd already won that round. In that moment, I realized how much control I had. I wasn't going to let her walk out and start a new life with her lover, not without consequences. I told her she had to choose me or Jake. She tried to deny everything, but I threw the evidence in her face. That's when she snapped. She threw a glass at the wall, screaming and cursing, calling me all sorts of names. I stood there, calm but firm, knowing I'd finally broken her. I told her I was done pretending, done being a fool for love. If she wanted to leave, she could go, but she'd regret it. That night she packed her bags and left. She was furious, crying, full of rage and contempt. I watched her walk out the door, feeling a strange mixture of relief and heartbreak. I knew this was the end of our marriage, but honestly, I didn't care. I'd taken back some control. I'd forced her to face the truth. Looking back, I realized that even in my weakest moments, fighting cancer, feeling betrayed, I still had the strength to fight for myself, for my dignity. I learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't just hurting someone back, but exposing the lies, the betrayal, and walking away with your head held high. After she left, the house was eerily quiet. For the first time in years, I was alone, really alone. I didn't sleep that night, just lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying everything that had happened. The anger had started to fade into a numb kind of sadness, but the pain of betrayal was still fresh. I kept thinking about all the moments I'd missed, all the signs I ignored, all the times I trusted her when I should have seen through her bullshit. That trust was shattered, and honestly, I felt like I was rebuilding from the ground up. In the days that followed, I started to feel a strange sense of clarity. As much as I wanted to lash out or drown myself in rage, I knew I had to focus on healing, whether that was physical, emotional, or just mental. My body was still weak from chemo, but my mind was sharper than ever. I knew that I'd been played, that Emily had been lying and cheating behind my back for months, maybe longer. It made me mad, sure, but it also made me realize how much I'd let myself be blind. I'd been so caught up in fighting cancer, trying to save myself, that I'd ignored the warning signs. I'd ignored her coldness, her dismissiveness, her constant lies because I thought I was doing everything right. Now I saw the truth. I was just a backup plan for her, someone she'd replace the moment she found a better option. It was then that I decided I wasn't going to let her ruin me entirely. I had to rebuild my life piece by piece. I reached out to my closest friends, told them everything, and for once I let my guard down. They were furious on my behalf, telling me I deserved someone who actually cared, who wouldn't cheat and lie. I wasn't sure I believed I'd ever trust anyone again, but I knew I couldn't stay stuck in this bitterness forever. I started to focus on myself, going back to the gym slowly, trying to eat better, and most importantly, working on healing my emotional wounds. But I couldn't forget what she had done. The betrayal haunted me every day, every hour. I kept thinking about Jake, about how he thought he could sneak in and steal my wife while I was battling for my life. That thought made me sick. I wanted to do something about it, to make sure they both got what was coming to them. I didn't want to be petty exactly, but I also didn't want them to walk away scot-free. I started gathering more evidence, more dirt, just in case I needed it. I even reached out to a few of Jake's exes, people who knew him well, and found out he was no saint. Turns out, he'd been cheating on his last few girlfriends, too. That made me feel a little better. At least I wasn't the only fool who got played. One thing I learned through all this is that sometimes revenge isn't about hurting someone just to hurt them. It's about reclaiming your dignity, making them see that their actions have consequences. I didn't want Emily to think she could walk all over me, or that she could just start over with Jake without paying a price. I wanted her to feel the pain of losing everything, because she deserved that at least. She'd taken my trust, my love, and my sense of security, and I wasn't going to let her walk away without some form of accountability. I made it clear I wasn't interested in reconciliation. Whatever love I had left evaporated that day she betrayed me. I was done. The hardest part was accepting that I'd lost her, and maybe I'd lost a part of myself along the way. But I also realized that I was stronger than I thought. That even in my weakest moments fighting cancer, feeling betrayed, I still had the power to stand up, to fight back, to reclaim my life. I didn't want her to think she could destroy me and walk away, not without consequences. So I started planning my next steps, legal, emotional, whatever it took to move forward. I knew I couldn't undo what had happened, but I could control how I responded, and I was determined not to let her win entirely. In that quiet, lonely house, I made a promise to myself that I'd focus on healing, on getting stronger, on building a new life, a better one without her. The pain still lingers, but somehow, I also feel like I'm finally taking back the power I lost. I learned that betrayal cuts deep, but it also reveals who you really are, and I'm discovering that I'm tougher than I ever thought possible. Weeks went by after she left, and I started to put my plan into motion. I knew I couldn't just sit around and wait for justice to find me. I had to be proactive. My focus was on rebuilding myself physically and mentally, but I also knew that cutting her out completely was the only way to truly move on. Every time I thought about her, I felt that old rage bubbling up, so I made a conscious choice to channel that energy into myself. I started seeing a therapist, not just to deal with the cancer, but to process everything that happened. I'd always been a guy who kept things bottled up, but I realized I needed to let it out, face it head on. One day, I finally decided I'd had enough of feeling like a victim. I wanted to make sure she'd never forget what she did, how she played me while I was vulnerable. I also wanted to send her a clear message that I was done being her doormat. I reached out to a lawyer just to get some advice about the legal side of things, divorce, of course, but also maybe some way to secure my financial future, given what she'd done with Jake. I was determined not to let her walk all over me, no matter how exhausted I was. I had nothing to lose anymore. At the same time, I started to gather people's stories about Jake, mutual friends, ex-girlfriends, even some colleagues. Turns out the guy had a pretty bad reputation for cheating and lying. I didn't want to stoop to his level, but I figured if I could expose him publicly, maybe she'd see that she wasn't just leaving me behind. She was also making a mistake. I wasn't out to destroy her, but I wanted her to feel the weight of everything she'd done, the lies, the betrayal, the secret wedding plans. I wanted her to see that her actions had consequences, and I wanted her to regret choosing Jake over our marriage. I also started to think about my future. Maybe I'd never be the same after what happened, but I was still here. I was still fighting. I realized that I needed to focus on my health, my recovery, and finding happiness again. That's what kept me going. I slowly started dating again cautiously, but it helped me see that life was still worth living, even after betrayal like this. I wasn't just some wounded victim. I was a man who'd been betrayed, yes, but also someone who could rebuild and come out stronger. One night, I decided to send Emily a message, not to beg or plead, but to make her understand that I knew everything. I told her I was done chasing her, done waiting around for her to come back because she'd already moved on. I told her I'd be fine without her, that I was stronger than her lies and her secrets. I said that I hoped she found whatever it was she was looking for, but that I wouldn't be part of her new life anymore. I wanted her to see that I wasn't just another fool she could manipulate. I was someone who'd taken back control. Honestly, it felt good to finally say what I'd been holding inside for so long. The final piece of my plan was to cut all ties clean. No more late-night texts, no more checking her social media, no more obsessing over what she was doing. I knew that if I kept holding on to her, I'd never heal. So I blocked her number, deleted her from all my social media, and focused entirely on myself. I wanted to leave her behind, not just physically but emotionally too. That was the hardest step, letting go of the anger, the resentment, the hope that maybe she'd change her mind. But I knew deep down she'd made her choices, and I had to accept them. Now looking back, I realized that what I went through was one of the toughest things I've ever faced. Losing the woman I loved, discovering she'd betrayed me with her best friend, planning a wedding behind my back, all of it crushed me in ways I can't fully describe. But somehow, I found a way to stand back up, to reclaim my life, my dignity, my strength. I learned that sometimes betrayal can teach you who you really are, and that even in your darkest moments, there's always a chance to start over. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this. I am finally free of her lies, and I am determined to build a life that's honest, real, and mine. Now, sitting here reflecting on everything, I realize that the pain I endured was a brutal but necessary lesson. Betrayal like this doesn't just hurt, it changes you. It forces you to confront your vulnerabilities, your trust, and your strength. I won't pretend it was easy to pick up the pieces, but I also know I wouldn't be where I am today without going through it. I've come to accept that. Some things are beyond our control, and sometimes, the best thing you can do is cut your losses and move forward. Losing Emily was one of the hardest things I've ever faced, especially considering the timing. Fighting cancer, trying to stay hopeful, only to discover that the person I loved the most had been secretly planning to replace me with someone I despise. But what I've learned is that betrayal is the end of the road. It's just a detour. It's a brutal reminder to trust yourself first and foremost, to notice the signs before they become irreversible. I've become more cautious, yes, but also more aware of what I deserve. Honesty, loyalty, someone who stands by me, not behind my back. Through all of this, I've found a new sense of purpose. I want to heal completely, physically and emotionally. I want to reconnect with who I am without that weight of betrayal dragging me down. I've come to terms with the fact that I might never fully forget what happened, but I can forgive myself for trusting too much, and I can forgive her for crossing a line I never imagined she would. That doesn't mean I forgive her actions, but I refuse to let her define my entire story. This experience has shown me that revenge, when used wisely, isn't about hurting others just for the sake of it. It's about reclaiming your power, making them see what they lost, and ultimately choosing yourself over the pain. I've learned that I don't need her approval or validation anymore. I am enough. My strength isn't in how much I can endure, but in how I choose to rebuild after everything falls apart. So I want anyone reading this to know one thing. Betrayal can break you in ways you never thought possible, but it can also be the catalyst for growth. Don't let it destroy you entirely. Use it as fuel to move forward. Trust yourself, listen to your gut, and remember that the pain is temporary, even if it feels like it'll never end. The most important thing is to keep going, keep fighting, and never let anyone take away your sense of worth. I didn't think I'd survive this, but I did, and now I'm finally starting to rebuild a life that's honest, real, and mine. And that's the best revenge of all.